It's time for a conversation about the things we share in common. Our common hopes, our common fears, our common struggles. Together, we'll wrestle with the questions that we all have about the issues that affect our lives. This is The Common Good. Now, here are your hosts, Brian Fromm and Ian Simkins.
Hi, friends. Welcome back to The Common Good. My name is Ian Simkins, and because this is a Jesus show, I feel compelled to tell you Brian Fromm is not here. Let's just give the cards on the table. He's in Florida or New Mexico or somewhere not here. So we're calling this the Week of Ian's Friends, and you can find us on Facebook at The Common Good Radio Show, 1160hope.com, plus the show is podcasted. But I cannot tell you how excited I am to have in the flesh, in the studio, Dr. Warren Anderson. Doctor, welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you, Ian. It is so good to be here with you.
Just to let people know, first off, professionally, you're the director of the DeMoss Center for Worship and the Performing Arts at Judson University, my alma mater.
Yes.
But anecdotally, probably 60% of the time when I say, a mentor once told me, I'm talking about Warren Anderson. And also anecdotally, you might be one of my very favorite people to have breakfast with, just so that people understand the general vibe of what they're getting into here.
Okay.
I think
fair warning.
Fair warning for everybody involved. There's not breakfast now, but I should. Yeah, failure on my part. My goodness. But I think you are truly one of the wisest, most gifted leaders and communicators of our time. And honestly, I'm a better husband, father, and pastor because of your influence over the last decade and a half. So, thank you for you and your heart and the way that you lead people so exceptionally well. And maybe you gathered by the title, but your field of expertise in particular is this big, massive category of worship, right? Which encompasses a lot of things, but you also have a blog that I find brilliant. You can find it at emmausroadworshipers.com. And there's one in particular that you wrote that, because I'm wearing a cardigan right now, I have a particular affection for. And the title is this: Worship Leading Lessons from Mr. Rogers. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, the documentary that was released a little while ago, I didn't see it in the theaters, but my wife and I went to one of those red boxes and brought it home.
So good.
And because we both were raised on Mr. Rogers, and because I had read good reviews, we wanted to throw it in there. And we watched this thing, and there were, of course, numerous moments of nostalgia that were fabulous.
Right.
But I found myself 2 or 3 times tearing up at the intentional way that Fred Rogers structured his mission in life with the children.
Yep.
And because an area that I'm passionate about at this stage of my life over the last 10 years or so is worship and how worship leaders serve the local churches. I just saw numerous areas where what Rogers did on his show could be modified and adapted and used by contemporary worship leaders to bring a sense of community to churches that sometimes, especially as they grow larger, feel less and less like a home.
Okay, so this is what you do. You always do this. You have these nuggets of truth that are such gold that I don't even know that you realize. Like what you just said about bringing a sense of community and worship leading, that for, I think, a lot of people might even be news to them. Like, I thought the worship leader led the songs, right? They're the musician. Like, can you think of some specific ways, not only that maybe worship leaders do that, but Fred Rogers specifically, like, helped create and cultivate community through intentional action?
Yeah, but let me just go back to one thing you said, because that could be a whole nother show. And that's the whole idea of contemporary worship leaders fulfilling some kind of pastoral role,
yes,
as opposed to just being good musicians.
That's right.
There is much value in worship leaders being good band leaders, knowing how to cue, knowing how to tell the drummer, no, 2 and 4, 2 and 4, right. Knowing how to say to the flute player, a little bit shrill, pull that in a little bit. All of that's hugely important, and music is very, very critical in
Yes.
contemporary worship.
Yes.
I'm not denigrating that. My gosh, my dad was a PhD in music.
Right.
But we lose, if we focus all of our energy on that, we lose the very real possibility of worship leaders actually being worship leaders.
Right.
And not old school music directors like my dad was in the 50s and 60s and 70s. He wasn't trying to influence anybody and to connect the dots between what was the elements of the service so that people would be able to hear and understand and experience a more unifying and aesthetically and intrinsically united experience. He just wanted the music to sound good.
Right.
And that's how he was trained.
Got it.
So no big deal there. But worship leaders today have the potential to do some of the things that Rogers did. So here's one of them from the observations that I had. His biographer said, "A neighborhood was a place when you felt worried, scared, unsafe, that would take care of you, would provide understanding and safety. That's what the neighborhood was for Fred. And if we substitute church for neighborhood, is our church a place of safety? Is it a place where when we feel worried, we can get comfort?
Yeah.
And is our worship leader, God help us, is our worship leader providing some of that safety, providing some of that comfort in what he or she says, in the songs that are chosen, in the connections between those songs? Or, as I find is often the case, are we simply singing a bunch of really, really good songs and there's nothing evil about that?
Right.
There's nothing, and God uses that. And God uses that. But could he use the Sunday morning worship set even more profoundly in the lives of his people if there was a little bit more thought behind connecting the dots and making it an organic experience all the way from the opening to the closing?
So why do you think the connecting of the dots thing is so rare and or difficult? We've talked about this extensively over coffee, over breakfast, but I think that you're particularly positioned to speak well to the why of some of these trends, and you get it. I appreciate your even-handedness. It's important to have good musicianship. It's not bad to sing good songs. Why do you feel, though, that so many churches have trended toward simply the singing of good songs and have struggled to really think deeply about the cohesion of the whole experience?
It feels to me that what I would want in a Sunday morning experience based on my training and my passions doesn't seem to be the primary value in most American contemporary worship services today. It feels like there are all kinds of values that are very important. Values like singing songs that people recognize, singing the hippest and most latest, making sure you've got something from Bethel on your set list or something from Hillsong United. Used to be you had to have a Tomlin in there and you had to have a Redman, or as Aaron Nyquist used to say, his worship services that he was attending, 3 Tomlins and a Redman and you're good, And it used to be that, but I think, honestly, it goes really deep. I think it goes to our insecurities about being the church.
Wow.
And our insecurities that come from the top down. And our insecurities about needing to be culturally relevant and needing to feel as if we have something to say. And so we look at the culture and we see what the dominant voices in the culture are, and we say we better have something like that in our church services.
Wow.
And that isn't the least bit countercultural. That is completely cultural.
Right.
And Jesus was nothing if not countercultural.
Yes, right.
And so where are we following Jesus in that model, corporately and ecclesiastically speaking?
Yes.
I don't know that we are. Now, is it bad? No. Are people being blessed? Yes, of
Absolutely.
course. Is God glorified? Yes. But when we are following so hard after what we think, after what we see on YouTube, after what the record companies tell us we have to have because this is the cutting edge worship stuff.
Yes,
and
right.
if you're not doing this, the implied message is you're not with the program, and people won't come to your church. They won't tithe. Your church is going to close. I mean, all the way down the line.
Yep.
And even worse than that, that you are not in touch with what God is doing right now, so you better get on the bandwagon or you're going to be irrelevant, and none of us wants to be irrelevant.
Yeah, right. Okay, so I have so many questions about that.
Sorry.
I don't even know. No, that's so good. Coming up next, I want to particularly ask you about the insecurities that you mentioned and some of our innate drive and desire to be relevant as the church. So that's coming up next with Dr. Warren Anderson of Judson University on The Common Good on AM 1160. Hope for your life.